And thank you very much for coming to Hawkeye's House of Horrors today. And I'm Hawkeye, and I'm going to bring to you today my next horror film of 1981 that I absolutely think is most certainly worth seeing, and that is The Howling, another werewolf film. And I'm a weirdo. I mean, I love An American Werewolf in London, but I actually, if you need to know, I actually prefer this one over the John Landis classic, where I think the consensus is An American Werewolf in London might be the better of the two films. I would definitely say The Howling is more flawed, perhaps, than American Werewolf in London, but I just love it. Um, and certainly, I get this with Landis's as well, but I find the director Joe Dante seems to be having a lot of fun behind the camera, as he is in. I find in each of his films as well. But um, I love this film, and I'm going to get to reviewing it for you now. Now, as I said, it was directed by Joe Dante, who also had done Piranha in the 70s. And I'm going to say maybe his most famous is Gremlins, that he did in the mid 80s, a few years after this one. Now, the screenplay was done by John Sayles, who had done Piranha for Joe Dante, as well as one other that I have reviewed, and that was Alligator from 1980. And as well on the screenplay was Terrence H. Winkless. Now, he did some other writing as well, but I'd say the things that jumped out to me, he did direct the original Blood Fist, and he definitely did some Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, directed quite a few episodes of that back in the 90s, that television show. Um, from what I understand, it was Winkless who had done the original screenplay, and it wasn't up to Dante's standards, I guess. So Sales was brought in to essentially rewrite the whole thing, and I'm not quite sure exactly how much was left from that original screenplay. But hey, I like it. It's got a lot of humor in there. It's real good stuff. Now, it's based on a novel by Gary Brandner. Now, I have read the novel, and this is a rare case. I would say it's the same with Jaws. I found that as well. I've read that book too. I think the movie's way better than the book. Now, the book's not horrible or bad, um, but the movie I think is much better than the novel, which I think was came out in the mid '70s, I believe. And there was three books that Brandner had written. I have read the first one and the second one. I don't think I've read the third, but he had three Howling books back in the late '70s, maybe the early '80s, that came out. Now, to compare the screenplay to the novel, they're really not the same. There are characters in there that were in the novel, um, but it's very loosely based, I would say, on the novel. Now, a more faithful adaptation to the novel, I haven't seen it in forever, was actually Howling 4, the original Nightmare, which I also remember I did not like at all. But I will at some point get around, watch that sucker, and review it for you too. But supposedly that's a more faithful adaptation to the movie. Now, this um, film was Uh, one of the first werewolf films I saw as a kid. And when I was a kid, like I was right into monsters. So like right into werewolves and vampires and mummies and everything like that. Um, Definitely this one and maybe the Monster Squad. They were the first two that I can remember off the top of my head were movies involving werewolves that I love. And this one I actually taped off the television. I think it was off the TBS back in the day. There were other films they were showing. Certainly, I'd never seen before as well, and fell in love with them as well. And they were both Toby Hooper films. That's Salem's Lot and The Fun House. I remember taping those off of that channel as well, and watching them countless times, and falling in love with those films. Now, the original director to this film was going to be Jack Conrad. Now, I looked him up. He did one other film. It was called Country Blue from 1973. Dub Taylor was in it. I remember he was in Bonnie and Clyde. And Jack Conrad himself was going to be in it. But there was a conflict between Conrad and the studio, which I think was Embassy even back then. They, um, I believe that's the particular studio. And then he was replaced by Joe Dante, who came in. Conrad, though, was still given producer credit, but I'm not sure how much he really had to do with the production of the film at all. Now, this film had a budget of $1.5 million back in 1981. Now, it had a nice box office take of $17.9 million. Transferring that into to today's money, 2024, that would be just under 62 million. Um, Pretty darn good though on a $1.5 million budget. It was distributed by Embassy. It was released on March the 13th, 1981 to 170 theaters across the US, I think. I'm not sure if it was Canada as well or outside the United States, those particular theaters. Um, Now, one thing I think is pretty cool in this film, and certainly wasn't in the book, it was done by John Sayles. There are a lot of characters in this film that are actually named after directors of other werewolf films through the history of film up until this point, such as Terence Fisher or Freddie Francis. Those are two that really jump out to me. I've seen a few of their films, British directors. Um, but as I was saying, there are characters that were in the book that are also in the film. Ones, from my memory, they may be the only ones. There's Karen White, main character, Chris Halloran, who's also a main character, and the Quist siblings. There's three of them. They were in the book, those names, and they were, in the film as well. Those same characters, um, more or less. Um, Now, in this film as well, there's a ton of other nods and references to werewolf films that I love about this film. I think maybe since maybe in the 90s at some point, films tended to reference things a lot more. Um, at the time this came out, you could absolutely reference things, but off the top of my head, it may have been more in parodies and comedies, like say Airplane, something like that, that where they would reference something, but it would be for a laugh. Certainly, it is here, but this is a horror film. Yeah, there's some funny stuff in it, but it's a horror film. So, it may have been one of the first ones to really go all in on referencing other films. I like that about films, and sometimes I must admit it is kind of tiring. Um, Sometimes when you have films that all it is just a reference of other stuff, and then you could probably quite easily say, well, all that other stuff is better than this. But I do like that about films where it's a loving nod towards something that came before it. Now, I love the cast in this film. I'm going to go through them all. First off, we have Dee Wallace. Um, she was the mom from E.T. That's probably what she'll always be known for. She was also the mom in Cujo, though, too. Um, she's great. A scream queen, no doubt. She does a bit of screaming in this, too. She's great. We also have Christopher Stone, who was also in Cujo. In fact, the two were engaged at the time that this film was made. and then they later were married. I really like him. He's really good too. We also have Dennis Dugan, who I remember when I was younger, I'd watch his show with my dad. He was in a couple episodes of the Rockford Files, um, but he did go on to direct some pretty big comedies like Happy Gilmore, as well as Beverly Hills Ninja. We have Patrick McNee, who was in The Avengers, and I'll always remember him in Waxwork as well. Another really good horror film from, I believe it was 1989. And then we have the legends. We have like John Carradine, Slim Pickens, Kevin McCarthy, who is a total douchebag of a boss to Dee Wallace's character. But boy, he still makes me laugh because he's a total douchebag, this character. Really good job there by McCarthy. And then we have Robert Picardo as well, playing Eddie Quist, the creepiest character in this film by a country mile, for sure. My favorite character in the film, though, is Dick Miller. Um, I swear he's only in this film for like 3 minutes, but when he's in the scene, he totally steals the scene. He's Walter Paisley, um, which is the name of a character he's played in a number of films. I don't think it's the same character in all of the films, but it's the same name. So once again, we have a nice nod, a reference to Dick Miller characters. But it's kind of funny because he was that in Hollywood Boulevard, is one. I think he originally did it in Bucket of Blood, which was a Roger Corman film back in the 60s. But Hollywood Boulevard was, in fact, Joe Dante's directorial debut as well. So that's kind of interesting as well, that little nod. But the Dick Miller character, he owns an occult bookstore. Um, I find his character is extremely crucial to the film as well because he's there to explain how the werewolves in this film work, but he does it very quick, very fast, and very funny. But you just watch the scene and you know exactly how the werewolves work in this film. So there's no surprises later or no guesses as to, how do I kill a werewolf? Something like that. He explains everything you're going to need to know in this one scene. It's great. And I found out this was Dick Miller's favorite of all his films. So that's cool too. And as I said, he's in two scenes and he's not on the screen for very long, but man, I find he's very memorable in this film. So I'll get into the story now. And the story is about Wallace, Karen White, who is a newscaster. And she's in the beginning of the film, you see she's on the wrong side of town so that she can meet this monstrous, I would certainly say sexually heightened super creep named Eddie Quest, Picardo, once again in a very creepy role. Um, After they meet, he shows his werewolf side to her. And yes, he certainly has a big time attraction to her. That's why he wanted to meet her, because of this attraction that he has to her. The cops then show up. One is Kenneth Toby, um, great old school actor, character actor. He was also in Dante's Gremlins, owned a gas station, and the rookie cop. Sorry, I didn't write down what his name is, that actor, but he shoots Eddie dead, or at least we think he's dead. Uh, there weren't any silver bullets in that gun, so he's not dead. But after this horrifying experience, Karen sees her shrink doctor, George Wagner, played by Patrick McNee, and he sets her up at a place called the Colony in Northern California. Now, this is to help her set her life straight, get her life back going together, and, you know, help her deal with this horrifying experience. I think Wallace does a very good job in bringing this across the screen to the viewer, and dealing with this horrible experience and how it's really affected her. Um, and it's not a stretch that this type of experience would be horrifying to most people. the one that she had to deal with in meeting Eddie Quist. Um, but along the way, she then brings her hubby along, Bill Neal, played by Christopher Stone. But guess what? Everybody there is a werewolf. Now, Rick Baker was originally going to do the effects of this film. I mentioned that for sure in my review to An American Werewolf in London, but instead he joined his old buddy John Landis to make that film, leaving his protege Rob Bottin, who is also an associate producer of this film, to the tasks of the effects. But boy, they were left in some very capable hands of Rob Bottin. Um, Baker, though, was still able to be a consultant for the effects of this film as well. But I'll get to it in a bit. But Bottin definitely gets a thumbs up for me on the effects in this film. Now, the music to this film, it's really good. Pino Donaggio did it. He also did in this time frame a couple of Brian De Palma great films. Dress to Kill. I did a review for that one as well, and Blowout, which I saw for the first time maybe only a few months ago. It's really good too. John Travolta is the star in that film. Now, the music of this film I think is great. It's certainly heavy on strings, which is okay, and I don't mind because I find maybe I'm mistaken, but I find films today may not use strings as heavily as they did. Certainly back in the 60s and earlier, there was a lot of strings back then. But I like that. It's really effective for sure. And I also find the score is very distinctive and able to set itself apart from others in the genre or others in the werewolf genre of horror films. Now, through some a little deeper into this review with things that I really enjoy about this film. I love the scene where news reporter Lou Landers, who that character is also in Gremlins at the end of the film as well. He's wonderful, played by James McCrell. He's practicing the news in the mirror in the bathroom, just standing there with a sheet of paper, practicing the news. Very, very funny. Um, he's actually in the camera looking, breaks that fourth wall too, which is very, I love that in films. He's looking directly at the camera, doing the news as well. Neil walks in and then Landers stops, and the two then have a small conversation. But Landers' voice is totally different now. Now he has this nice little southern twang in his voice. I love that. That's very funny, unexpected, and brings a smile to my face when I see that scene. Um, I also love when they're at the colony, when the group of men go hunting, but they don't need a dog to help them in hunting. They got TC. That's one of the quests, played by Don McLeod, who also has a huge infatuation with Karen as well, much like his brother. And I love how Chris and Terry Fisher, real good performance there, played by Belinda Balaski. Um, Both of them work with Karen on the news as well, but they're watching the ultimate classic, The Wolfman, in bed when they get a phone call and learn that Bill has actually been bitten by a wolf. Very cool. But guess what? Right after that happened, Bill, who is a man who likes to stay away from meat, starts driving into it like I would. And it's a nice little clue to everyone that okay, this guy's a werewolf for sure now. Absolutely. I love the scene of Terry going and checking out the Quist's cabin. It I like it a lot. There's some good tension. The music by Donaggio is really effective there. It's really good. And then one thing you see throughout the film, there's smiley faces that in this scene it's on a door or um, I believe at the beginning of the film when Karen's going to meet Eddie, there's one on a phone booth and one inside the porno shop that she goes in on a door. And it's an indication telling you, the viewer, where Eddie Quest is. Um, so she sees one of these in the um, door on a door within the cabin, and then is attacked by TC. So I shouldn't say it's an indication where Eddie is, but it's an indication maybe where a werewolf is. Um, and then after she cuts his hand off, in a really cool scene with good gore effects going on, she runs to the doctor's office and then comes face to face with Eddie, who gives us our first tremendous look at a werewolf, full body on two legs, an American Werewolf in London. It was on four. I like how it's very different here. This is on just on two legs, uh, giving us a good look at that. But unfortunately for Terry, this is the end for her. It got to some great use of bladder effects during this scene, and the scene where she's cutting off TC's hand um, in the wolf transformation scene. Now, much like an American Werewolf in London, this is the scene that you should remember, or there's a build up towards it. Some people have complained that uh, maybe a problem with the Howling is after this scene, the film cannot get back up to that same level that you're left with after this scene. And yeah, I guess I would agree with that, but the rest of the film doesn't suck or the rest of the film isn't bad. Um, but that is one complaint that I have heard or read while kind of, um, writing down and looking up stuff about this film for my review. Now, one thing I would say about um, the werewolf transformation scene that is different than American Werewolf in London is it goes on too long. Um, But boy, it still puts a smile on my face. It still got me. But it goes on too long, for sure. As I said, there's great use of bladder effects when Picardo, the actor, is on screen. Um, to me, that really holds up, I think, extremely well. Um, of when you see Robert Picardo on screen and like his body just transforming on screen for you, it's very effective. That's really well done. But when it goes to the fake head, that you can tell immediately that's a fake head. Um, Unfortunately, it cuts any kind of fear or tension away from the film. It then is kind of bounces back and tries to regain that same fear when Picardo shows back up. But it does kind of take away from the scene. So in the end, the werewolf transformation scene in an American Werewolf in London is the better of the two. Um, and that's a good reason why, in my opinion, right there. Now, as well, I do love the ending of this film. So I kind of disagree with that statement that oh you can't you didn't weren't able to build up to that same excitement that you got in the werewolf transformation because I love the end of this film where Karen, who's been bitten and she becomes a werewolf. She does it during a newscast live on TV. She turns into a werewolf. Um, and Chris Halloran is there, and he pulls out a gun, a rifle, and shoots her right on TV um, to show the world about werewolves that they exist. Um, and hey, this is real. Yet the reaction of the people is that hey, those were just effects, man. They're using effects on the news now, pretty good effects, which I kind of think is exactly how that would go down today. If that happened, people I think would react in that way that, oh, that was effects or that wasn't real. Um, Kind of desensitized to kind of the terrors, those horrors. Yeah,
Mm.
one thing I forgot to mention too, because when I was talking about the smiley faces, I think yeah, it's in the scene of Gremlins where the Zach Galligan's character is going to get food out of the refrigerator for the little mogwais that he has upstairs. There's a smiley face on the fridge. Um, so I really like that, and it's actually there on purpose, I think, to tell the audience the shit is gonna hit the fan now. You're not supposed to be feed those things after midnight, by the way. So that's kind of funny too. Now the fog in this film, I love it. I think it's amazing. It's really foggy. It's not just a little foggy. It's really foggy, and I think it just adds to the atmosphere of the film and the look and the surroundings. I I think Dante did a great job in getting that look of the fog. And I love the cameos in this film. First, we have Roger Corman, who Joe Dante worked for. I think at first he was he did trailers, I think, for him and an editor before he got into directing for Roger Corman. Um, but Dee Wallace is right at the beginning. She's in the phone booth. I think she was talking to Eddie Quist on the phone. She finishes, hangs up, and leaves. The Roger Corman is right outside the phone booth. He then comes in the phone booth and is like puts his fingers in where the money comes out and he's like looking for dimes, which is very funny and indicating to you how cheap his movies were. And he's looking for his next budget for his next film. That's really cool. We also have Forrest J. Ackerman. He's in Miller's Occult Shop. He's walking around with a magazine of famous monsters of filmland, which he was the editor of. So that's pretty cool. And also at the end, he was fairly well unknown at the time. We have Mick Garris, who went on to direct a couple of TV miniseries, Stephen King's The Stand and Stephen King's The Shining as well. Um, but he's with his girlfriend or his wife, watching TV, watching the news while this Karen White turns into a werewolf, and he's wondering what he's watching. He's like looking through the TV guide, but that's Mick Garris right there. And definitely, I love how this film is very different than An American Werewolf in London. They took very different steps along the way, and I really like that how they're very different and but they're both werewolf films. Um, and I really like how hey they each stand on their own really. Now, at the end of the film, we see there are at least three surviving werewolves. One of them is Marcia, because at the end of the film, she's in this bar and orders a rare burger, which, is the final laugh of the film. Um, but sadly, none of these werewolves are in any of the numerous sequels that came after the original Howling. And that's too bad. They should have maybe brought some of these characters back to, I don't know, continue this story on because there are numerous sequels, and the second one is a sequel to this. Um, but really, like this, even though it is like this story is over, once you see this, and then all the sequels kind of run their own story. They really aren't connected to this one, other than the second one, but oh boy, um, it's not good. But I will review that at some point, hopefully soon. Um, but due to this film, Dante then was given the opportunity to direct Gremlins for Steven Spielberg, and I love that film. So that's cool that he was given further opportunities because of this film. Now, supposedly there is talk of a remake of The Howling right now, um, perhaps to be made. Um, I would just suggest a couple of things. Don't go with jump scares. Like it's okay to have them, but don't be that's all you got. As well as remember the humor. Remember that this was also a funny movie. There were some good laughs in there. And John Sayles as well. I forgot to mention has a cameo in this as well. I mean he's got a funny cameo as I think Halloran and Fisher go to look at Eddie Quiff's body in the morgue, and John Sayles is working there at the morgue to show the body. Now, I do have this sucker on DVD. It's pretty good because there are some extras on here which are really cool. There's Unleashing the Beast, which is a making of the Howling. There's some deleted scenes, some outtakes. There's also Making a Monster Movie, another documentary of The Howling, and then there's commentary by Joe Dante, Dee Wallace, Christopher Stone, and Robert Picardo, which I have seen many moons ago, but it was good. It was funny, but um, yeah, I love that film, The Howling. So I will definitely go through the sequels. I know I got a couple more here I can get to, um, but that was fun. I really enjoyed The Howling. But hey, that's it. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't be afraid to give me a like, I guess. Or if you want, you can subscribe as well. There's certainly some other videos I've got as well that you can check out. Um, but anyways, have yourself an excellent day.